The morning of March 15, 1945, arrived with the kind of silence that preceded slaughter. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter pressed his face against the frost-rimmed observation slit of the concrete bunker, watching the gray dawn creep across the Saar River valley like smoke from a funeral pyre. Behind him, the men of the 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment huddled around a brazier that threw more shadow than warmth, their breath crystallizing in the underground command post that smelled of wet concrete, stale tobacco, and the metallic tang of fear. 300 meters to the east, across the frozen mudflats where the Saar had receded during the harsh winter, American Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division sat in hull-down positions, their long barrels trained on the German defensive line like accusing fingers. The Americans had been there for 6 days, content to probe with artillery and reconnaissance patrols, waiting for something. Klaus had counted 47 separate tank positions during his watches, each one precisely surveyed and recorded in the leather-bound observation log that never left the command bunker. "They're not attacking," muttered Unteroffizier Weber, the section leader whose Iron Cross had been earned during the retreat from the Bulge. Weber possessed the nervous energy of a man who had survived too many battles, his fingers constantly working the rosary beads that hung beneath his field gray tunic. 6 days we've been watching those Shermans, and they just sit there like they're waiting for an invitation to dinner. Klaus lowered his field glasses and turned from the observation slit. The command bunker contained 12 men from various companies of the 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment, hastily assembled into this ad hoc defensive position when Army Group G had ordered the construction of Strongpoint Siegfried 7 along the western approaches to Saarbrücken. The bunker itself represented German engineering at its most practical and desperate. Reinforced concrete walls 2 meters thick, steel-plated firing ports, and electrical lighting powered by a diesel generator that coughed and wheezed in the corner like a dying man. "Maybe the Americans are waiting for reinforcements," suggested Gefreiter Hoffmann, barely 18 years old and still possessing the kind of optimism that combat had not yet beaten out of him. Hoffmann cleaned his Gur 43 with the devotion of a monk tending relics, the semi-automatic rifle representing the latest in German small arms technology, though ammunition for it had become increasingly scarce. "Reinforcements." Weber's laugh held no humor. "Look around you, boy. We are the reinforcements." 12 men in a concrete box, holding a river crossing against an entire armored division. The Americans don't need reinforcements. They need patience. Klaus returned to the observation slit, adjusting the focus on his 6x30 field glasses to study the American positions. The 4th Armored Division had established a semicircular perimeter extending from the destroyed railway bridge to the north all the way down to the flooded quarry 2 kilometers south. Their defensive positions demonstrated textbook American doctrine: overlapping fields of fire, concealed approach routes, and sufficient depth to absorb a counterattack. But something nagged at Klaus, a tactical inconsistency that he couldn't quite identify. "Herr Obergefreiter," Weber called softly. "Regiment is on the radio." Klaus crossed to the field telephone, a heavy black instrument connected by buried cables to the regimental command post 15 kilometers to the rear. The voice that crackled through the earpiece belonged to Hauptmann Drescher, the operations officer whose precise Prussian accent seemed increasingly incongruous as the war dragged on. "Strongpoint Siegfried 7, this is Regiment. Report your status." "Regiment, this is Siegfried 7. No change in enemy disposition. American armor remains in defensive positions. Visibility good. Wind from the northwest at 5 knots. We count 47 Sherman tanks and approximately 2 companies of mechanized infantry." "Understood, Siegfried 7. Maintain observation and report any movement. Regiment out." Klaus hung up the telephone and studied the situation map pinned to the bunker wall. The map showed the 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment's positions stretching along a 40-kilometer front, with Strongpoint Siegfried 7 marked as a red circle in a sea of blue arrows representing American units. The tactical picture revealed the regiment's impossible situation: fewer than 3,000 men, most of them teenagers and overage reservists, attempting to hold a front that would have challenged a full-strength division. The diesel generator coughed twice and died, plunging the bunker into the gray half-light that filtered through the observation slits. Weber cursed and kicked the machine, but it remained silent. Emergency lanterns flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls that made the bunker feel more like a tomb than a fortress. "Generator's been acting up for 2 days," Weber explained to no one in particular. "Fuel's probably contaminated with water. Everything's falling apart at once." Klaus returned to his observation post as the pale sun climbed higher in the eastern sky. The American positions showed no sign of activity beyond the routine movements of sentries and the occasional Sherman traversing its turret to track some imaginary target. This passivity troubled him more than aggressive patrolling would have. Experienced troops didn't sit still for 6 days without reason. At 0930 hours, a new sound echoed across the valley. The deep rumble of heavy engines approaching from the German rear. Klaus raised his field glasses and scanned the road network behind the American lines, searching for the source of the mechanical symphony that grew steadily louder. But the sound came from the wrong direction. "Jesus Christ," whispered Hoffman, pressed against the southern observation slit. "Look at this." Klaus joined him at the slit and felt his stomach drop. Emerging from the forest road that led back to German lines came a column of armor that defied belief. Tiger II tanks, their massive hulls gleaming with winter camouflage paint, advanced in perfect formation toward strongpoint Siegfried 7. Klaus counted 12 of the 70-ton monsters, their 88mm guns elevated for traveling position, accompanied by Panzer IV tanks and half-tracks loaded with Panzer Grenadiers. "That's the 2 SS Panzer Corps," breathed Weber, who had somehow appeared beside them without making a sound.
Das Reich and Hohenstaufen Divisions.
"I saw those insignias during the Ardennes offensive." Klaus focused his field glasses on the lead Tiger II, where the divisional markings confirmed Weber's identification. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich had earned its reputation during the drive toward Bastogne, and the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen had fought with distinction during the defense of Arnhem. These were elite formations, the kind of units that Hitler reserved for critical operations. "But what are they doing here?" Hoffman asked, voicing the question that Klaus was afraid to consider. The answer came with horrible clarity as Klaus studied the advancing column through his field glasses. The SS Panzer Corps wasn't deploying for a defensive battle. Their formation, speed, and direction of approach indicated an assault mission. The Tiger II tanks maintained intervals appropriate for an attack, their commanders visible in the cupolas as they surveyed the American positions across the Saar River Valley. Klaus lowered his field glasses and felt the pieces of a tactical puzzle click into place with the finality of a coffin lid. The American 4th Armored Division hadn't been waiting for reinforcements. They had been waiting for the SS Panzer Corps to arrive. The Shermans in their hull-down positions weren't preparing for a river-crossing assault. They were preparing to receive one. "My God!" Klaus whispered as the full scope of the operation became clear. "We're the bait." The SS Panzer Corps continued its advance toward strongpoint Siegfried 7, but Klaus now understood that the concrete bunker and its 12 defenders served a purpose far more sinister than holding a river crossing. The American 4th Armored Division had deliberately positioned itself within sight of the German strongpoint, knowing that German doctrine called for armored counterattacks against enemy penetrations. The strongpoint's radio reports had been intercepted, analyzed, and used to draw the SS Panzer Corps into a carefully prepared killing ground. Weber stared at the approaching German armor with the expression of a man watching his own execution. "They've been monitoring our radio transmissions. Every report we've sent to regiment, every observation of American positions, every status update. The Americans have been listening to everything." Klaus nodded grimly as he watched the lead Tiger II tank approach the bunker. The massive vehicle's commander, an SS Oberführer whose black uniform bore the oak leaves of the Knight's Cross, stood in his cupola scanning the American positions with field glasses identical to Klaus's own. The officer's face showed the confidence of a veteran Panzer commander preparing for another successful engagement, unaware that he was leading his men into a trap. "How long have they known?" Hoffman asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "Since the beginning," Klaus replied, though the knowledge tasted like ashes. "Maybe longer. The Americans let us establish this strongpoint because they needed a reference point, a place where German armor would concentrate for a counterattack. We've been sending them intelligence reports on their own positions for 6 days. The implications cascaded through Klaus's mind like falling dominoes. The 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment's defensive positions along the Saar River hadn't been designed to stop an American advance. They had been designed to channel German armor into predetermined killing zones where American tank destroyers and aircraft could engage them with maximum effectiveness. Every bunker, every observation post, every radio transmission had contributed to an elaborate deception that would culminate in the destruction of the SS Panzer Corps. At 1,000 hours, the lead Tiger II tank reached strongpoint Siegfried 7 and ground to a halt beside the bunker's main entrance. The commander's hatch clanged open, and SS Oberführer Heinrich Brenner dropped into the bunker with the casual authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. Brenner's uniform bore the insignia of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, and his Knight's Cross gleamed against the black cloth like a distant star. "Obergefreiter, I need your latest intelligence report on American positions," Brenner announced without preamble, his Austrian accent lending a musical quality to words that carried the weight of doom. Klaus handed over the observation log, watching as Brenner studied the detailed sketches and position plots that Klaus had compiled during 6 days of meticulous surveillance. Each American tank position had been precisely located, each defensive obstacle carefully noted, each potential weakness identified and recorded. The log represented a masterpiece of tactical intelligence gathering, and Klaus realized with sick certainty that every entry had been anticipated and planned for by American commanders. "Excellent work," Brenner said, closing the log with a snap. "This intelligence will allow us to destroy the American bridgehead within 2 hours." The Führer personally selected the 2 SS Panzer Corps for this mission because he knew we would succeed where others had failed. Klaus watched through the observation slit as more Tiger II tanks moved into assault positions, their crews performing final checks on ammunition, fuel, and communications equipment. The 88mm guns on the massive tanks possessed the range and penetrating power to engage American Sherman tanks at distances where the Americans couldn't effectively return fire, but only if the SS tankers could maintain surprise and initiative. In a prepared defensive position with predetermined firing positions and coordinated artillery support, the Americans would possess every advantage except individual tank superiority. "Herr Oberführer," Klaus said carefully, "the Americans have been in position for 6 days. They've had time to register artillery, establish communication networks, and coordinate with air support." Brenner's pale blue eyes fixed on Klaus with the kind of intensity that had earned SS officers their fearsome reputation. "Are you suggesting that the 2 SS Panzer Corps cannot defeat a single American armored division?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting that the Americans may have been expecting us." "Expecting us?" Brenner's laugh held the brittle confidence of a gambler who had never lost a significant wager. "The Americans are reactionary forces, Obergefreiter. They respond to German initiatives. They don't anticipate them. This is why they have been retreating since Normandy." Klaus bit back his response, recognizing the futility of arguing with a man whose worldview depended on German tactical superiority. But the evidence of American tactical sophistication lay spread across the Saar River Valley like a textbook example of defensive planning. The Sherman tanks hadn't been positioned randomly. They occupied the exact positions where they could achieve overlapping fields of fire against German armor advancing from strongpoint Siegfried 7. The American defensive positions demonstrated a level of tactical understanding that Klaus had learned to respect during months of retreat across France and Belgium. At 1,030 hours, Brenner departed the bunker to rejoin his command tank, leaving behind the distinctive odor of leather polish and boot grease that clung to SS uniforms. Klaus watched through the observation slit as the SS Oberführer climbed into his Tiger II's commander's cupola and began speaking rapidly into his throat microphone, coordinating the final preparations for an assault that Klaus now understood would end in catastrophe. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich deployed in textbook formation across the approaches to strongpoint Siegfried 7, with Tiger II tanks forming the spearhead and Panzer IV tanks providing flank security. Panzer Grenadiers dismounted from their half-tracks and advanced on foot, their STG-44 assault rifles and Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons clearly visible in the morning sunlight. The entire formation moved with the precision of a military parade, each unit maintaining proper intervals and communication discipline as they prepared to cross the frozen mudflats toward the American positions. Klaus counted 64 German armored vehicles in the assault formation, representing more firepower than the 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment had seen concentrated in a single location since the retreat from the West Wall. The sight should have filled him with confidence, but instead he felt the cold certainty of approaching disaster. The SS Panzer Corps was advancing into a killing ground that the Americans had spent 6 days preparing, guided by intelligence reports that Klaus himself had transmitted to regiment. "They're really going to do it," Weber muttered, pressing his face against another observation slit. "They're going to attack across open ground against prepared positions." "It gets worse," Klaus replied, adjusting the focus on his field glasses to study the American defensive line. "Look at the Shermans. They're not moving." Weber joined Klaus at the primary observation slit and studied the American tank positions through his own field glasses. The Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division remained motionless in their hull-down positions, their crews invisible behind closed hatches. No turrets traversed to track the approaching German armor. No commanders appeared in cupolas to coordinate defensive fires. The American tanks sat silent and still as tombstones, waiting. "That's not normal," Weber said slowly. "Tank crews should be making final preparations, testing communications, registering range cards. They're too quiet." Klaus nodded as another piece of the tactical puzzle fell into place. Experienced tank crews didn't wait passively for enemy armor to approach within effective range. They maneuvered to achieve advantageous positions, coordinated with supporting artillery, and maintained constant communication with adjacent units. The American silence suggested either supreme confidence or careful planning that extended far beyond the positions visible from Strongpoint Siegfried 7. At 1045 hours, SS Oberführer Brenner's voice crackled through the radio speakers of his command tank, audible through the bunker's thin concrete walls. "All stations, this is Wotan. Attack formation advance to phase line Alpha. Execute, execute, execute." The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, lurched into motion with a rumble that seemed to shake the earth itself. 64 armored vehicles advanced across the frozen mudflats in perfect formation, their treads throwing up clouds of crystallized mud and their engines filling the valley with mechanical thunder. The Tiger II tanks led the assault, their massive hulls tilted forward as they negotiated the rough terrain, their 88mm guns trained on the silent American positions. Klaus watched through his field glasses as the German armor covered the first 200 meters without drawing a single shot from the American defenders. The Shermans remained motionless in their hull-down positions, their crews maintaining radio silence and weapon discipline that spoke of professional competence rather than panic or confusion. The American defensive line stretched across the valley like a coiled spring, waiting for the precise moment to release its accumulated energy. "Why aren't they shooting?" Hoffman asked, his young voice cracking with tension. "The Germans are within effective range." Klaus understood why the Americans waited, though the knowledge filled him with dread rather than tactical appreciation. The 4th Armored Division wasn't interested in merely repelling a German attack. They intended to destroy the SS Panzer Corps completely, and that required drawing the German armor deeper into the killing zone where escape would become impossible. At 1050 hours, the German assault formation reached phase line Alpha, approximately 400 meters from the American defensive line. The Tiger II tanks maintained their advance, their commanders visible in the cupolas as they searched for targets among the hull-down Sherman positions. The formation's perfect discipline began to fray as individual tank commanders made minor course corrections to avoid obstacles or improve their firing positions. Klaus gripped his field glasses tighter as he watched SS Oberführer Brenner's command tank crest a small ridge that provided clear observation of the American defensive line. The SS officer stood in his cupola, studying the Sherman positions through field glasses, his black uniform making him clearly visible against the white camouflage paint of his Tiger II tank. "Now," Klaus whispered, knowing that the Americans would never allow a German commander such a clear view of their positions without responding. The American response, when it came, demonstrated the kind of tactical coordination that Klaus had learned to fear during the long retreat across Western Europe. The Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division opened fire simultaneously, their 76mm guns creating a wall of high-explosive and armor-piercing projectiles that converged on the German assault formation with mathematical precision. But the tank fire was only the beginning. American artillery, pre-registered during 6 days of careful preparation, began falling among the German armor with devastating accuracy. 155mm shells from the 12-core artillery burst in perfect airbursts above the advancing Tiger II tanks, their fragments ripping through vision blocks, antenna mounts, and external equipment. The barrage didn't seek to destroy the massive German tanks with direct hits. Instead, it systematically degraded their fighting capability by eliminating optical equipment and communication systems. Klaus watched in horrified fascination as the German assault formation began to disintegrate under the coordinated American defensive fire. 3 Tiger II tanks erupted in flames within the first 30 seconds, their ammunition exploding in secondary detonations that sent turrets cartwheeling through the air like children's toys. Panzer IV tanks swerved desperately to avoid the artillery barrage, breaking formation and exposing their thinner side armor to American anti-tank guns that had remained carefully concealed until this moment. SS Obergefreiter Brenner's command tank took a direct hit from a Sherman 76mm gun, the armor-piercing round penetrating the Tiger II's frontal armor and detonating the main gun ammunition. The massive tank shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from its hatches, but Brenner somehow survived the initial explosion. Klaus watched through his field glasses as the SS officer attempted to climb from his burning tank, his black uniform already smoldering from the internal fire. A second Sherman round struck Brenner's Tiger II in the turret ring, and the SS Obergefreiter simply ceased to exist in a flash of superheated metal and explosive force. The command tank continued to burn, its radio antennas melted into grotesque sculptures of twisted metal, cutting off communication with the surviving elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich. The American defensive fire intensified as more concealed positions revealed themselves. Tank destroyers emerged from camouflaged positions among the trees on both flanks, their high-velocity guns capable of penetrating Tiger II armor at ranges where the German tanks couldn't effectively return fire. American infantry armed with bazookas appeared among the rocks and debris near the river, launching rocket-propelled grenades at the surviving German armor from point-blank range. Klaus realized that the 4th Armored Division had established a killing zone with overlapping fields of fire that left no avenue of escape for the German assault formation. Every conceivable approach route had been covered by anti-tank weapons, every potential defensive position had been registered by artillery, every tactical option had been anticipated and countered. "They planned this," Weber said in a voice filled with sick admiration. "Every detail, every position, every timing. The Americans have been planning this battle since we built this bunker." Klaus nodded as he watched the remnants of the SS Panzer Corps attempt to withdraw under the continuing American barrage. Fewer than 20 German vehicles remained operational, their crews abandoning tactical formation in favor of individual survival. Some tanks attempted to retreat back toward German lines, only to discover that American artillery had registered the withdrawal routes as well as the approach routes. Others tried to find defilade among the terrain features, but the Americans had positioned their weapons to eliminate dead ground where German tanks might find shelter. The 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen fared no better than Das Reich, as it attempted to support the failing assault. Their Tiger II tanks advanced into the killing zone with the same confidence and tactical skill that had made them feared throughout the European theater. But tactical skill became irrelevant when faced with prepared positions and coordinated defensive fires. Klaus watched 18 more Tiger II tanks die within 10 minutes, their crews becoming casualties of a battle that had been lost before it began. At 1,130 hours, the last German tank fell silent, its crew either dead or captured by American infantry who had advanced under cover of their own artillery. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich and the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen had ceased to exist as effective fighting formations, their carefully trained crews and irreplaceable equipment destroyed in a battle that lasted less than 1 hour. Klaus lowered his field glasses and stared at the smoking wreckage that littered the Saar River valley. 64 German armored vehicles had advanced with confidence toward what they believed would be another tactical victory against American forces. Now their burning hulks served as monuments to tactical hubris and strategic deception on a scale that Klaus was only beginning to understand. "Jesus Christ," Hoffman whispered, his young face pale with shock. "They're all dead. The entire corps. Gone in 1 hour." Weber removed his helmet and ran trembling fingers through his gray hair. "Not just dead, boy. Murdered. We murdered them with our intelligence reports, our observations, our radio transmissions. Every piece of information we sent to regiment was passed along to the Americans." Klaus understood that Weber spoke the truth, though the full implications of their unwitting collaboration remained too enormous to comprehend completely. The 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment hadn't been defending the Saar River crossing. They had been providing target intelligence for an elaborate trap. Every defensive position, every observation post, every radio transmission had contributed to the destruction of Germany's most elite armored formations. The silence that followed the battle felt more oppressive than the mechanical thunder that had preceded it. American recovery vehicles began moving among the German wrecks, towing disabled tanks and collecting prisoners from crews who had survived the initial destruction of their vehicles. The efficiency of the American salvage operations suggested planning that extended far beyond the tactical level, as if the battle had been choreographed by staff officers who understood its strategic implications for the entire European theater. At 1,200 hours, the field telephone rang with the harsh insistence of a funeral bell. Klaus answered with numb resignation, knowing that regiment would demand an explanation for the disaster that had unfolded within sight of strongpoint Siegfried 7. "Siegfried 7, this is regiment. Report your status immediately." Klaus stared at the radio handset, trying to find words that could convey the magnitude of what he had witnessed. How could he explain that the 2 SS Panzer Corps had been destroyed in less than 1 hour? How could he describe the clinical precision with which the Americans had dismantled Germany's most powerful armored formation? "Regiment, this is Siegfried 7. The SS attack has failed. Both divisions are destroyed."
No survivors visible.
The silence from regiment stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Hauptmann Drescher's voice returned, stripped of its usual Prussian confidence. "Repeat your last transmission, Siegfried 7. Regiment, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, and the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen have been destroyed. Complete loss of equipment and personnel. American forces maintain defensive positions." Another silence, followed by what sounded like muffled conversation in the background before Drescher returned to the radio. "Siegfried 7. You will maintain your observation post and continue reporting American activities. Regiment out." Klaus hung up the telephone and returned to the observation slit, where American crews were already beginning the systematic destruction of disabled German vehicles that could not be recovered immediately. Demolition charges reduced Tiger II tanks to scrap metal with the same efficiency that had characterized every aspect of the American defensive operation. Nothing would be left for German forces to recover or analyze. "They knew," Klaus said to no one in particular. "The Americans knew exactly what we would do, how we would react, when we would attack. They've been inside our planning process from the beginning." Weber lit a cigarette with shaking hands, the tobacco smoke mixing with the acrid fumes that drifted from the burning wrecks across the valley. "How long have they been listening to our radio transmissions? How many other battles have been lost because they knew our plans in advance?" Klaus considered the question as he watched American engineers begin placing demolition charges on the last intact Tiger II tank. The systematic nature of the American victory suggested intelligence gathering that extended far beyond simple radio interception. The 4th Armored Division had positioned itself with the precision of surgeons performing a delicate operation, each element placed exactly where it could achieve maximum effectiveness against German armor advancing from strongpoint Siegfried 7. "They've broken our codes," Klaus said with sudden certainty. "Not just our radio transmissions, but our entire communication system. They know what we're going to do before we do it." The implications of that realization stretched far beyond the tactical disaster that had unfolded in the Saar River Valley. If American intelligence services had penetrated German military communications at the strategic level, then every defensive plan, every troop movement, every tactical decision was being anticipated and countered before German forces could implement them. The war wasn't being lost through superior American firepower or industrial capacity. It was being lost through superior intelligence and planning that rendered German tactical skill irrelevant. Hoffmann stared through the observation slit at the smoking wreckage that had once been the pride of the German armored forces. What happens to us now? Are we supposed to just sit here and watch? Klaus didn't answer immediately, knowing that their tactical situation had become hopeless with the destruction of the SS Panzer Corps. The 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment possessed no reserves capable of countering an American advance across the Saar River, and regiment clearly had no plans for evacuating strongpoint Siegfried 7. The bunker's 12 defenders had become witnesses to a tactical revolution that rendered traditional defensive warfare obsolete. "We wait," Klaus finally replied. "We wait and we watch, and we try to understand how completely we've been outmaneuvered." The afternoon passed with agonizing slowness as American recovery operations continued across the battlefield. Klaus maintained his observation schedule, dutifully recording American activities in the leather-bound log that had become a catalog of German tactical failures. Each entry felt like writing his own obituary, documenting the systematic destruction of military doctrine that had dominated European warfare since the days of Frederick the Great. At 1,500 hours, American infantry began advancing toward strongpoint Siegfried 7 in extended skirmish lines, their rifles and automatic weapons ready for immediate action. The soldiers moved with the confidence of veterans who understood that their enemy possessed no effective means of resistance, but they maintained tactical discipline that spoke of professional competence rather than casual overconfidence. Klaus watched the Americans approach through his field glasses, noting their equipment, formation, and apparent intentions. The soldiers belonged to the 8th Infantry Division, their shoulder patches clearly visible in the afternoon sunlight. They advanced methodically, checking each potential position for German defenders, but their movements suggested certainty rather than caution. "They're not expecting resistance," Weber observed, studying the American infantry through another observation slit. "Look at their spacing, their rate of advance. They know we're here, but they also know we can't hurt them." Klaus understood Weber's tactical assessment and recognized its accuracy. The strongpoint's 12 defenders possessed individual small arms and limited ammunition, insufficient for sustained resistance against an entire infantry company. More importantly, the Americans undoubtedly knew the exact strength and capabilities of the German garrison, having monitored every radio transmission from the bunker during the past 6 days. At 1,530 hours, American soldiers surrounded strongpoint Siegfried 7 and began calling for surrender in accented but comprehensible German. Their demands possessed the matter-of-fact tone of professionals conducting routine business, without the emotional intensity that Klaus had expected from enemy soldiers who had just witnessed the destruction of elite German formations. "Deutsche Soldaten," called an American sergeant whose voice carried the authority of combat experience. "Sie sind umzingelt.
Ergeben Sie sich jetzt, und Sie werden nicht verletzt."
Klaus looked around the bunker at the faces of men who had served faithfully throughout the long retreat across Western Europe. They had endured privation, casualties, and tactical defeats with the stoicism that characterized German soldiers, but they had never faced the absolute tactical hopelessness that now confronted them. The war had moved beyond their ability to influence its outcome through individual courage or tactical skill. "Herr Obergefreiter," Weber said formally, "what are your orders?" Klaus stared through the observation slit at the American soldiers who waited patiently for a response to their surrender demand. These men had just participated in the destruction of the 2 SS Panzer Corps, eliminating Germany's most powerful armored formations through tactical planning that bordered on prescience. They represented a military system that had evolved beyond traditional concepts of battlefield courage and tactical excellence. "We surrender," Klaus said quietly, knowing that the words represented more than the capitulation of 12 soldiers in a concrete bunker. "We surrender because continuing to fight would be a meaningless gesture that serves no tactical or strategic purpose." Weber nodded and began removing the bolt from his Gur 43, rendering the weapon inoperable before the Americans could capture it. The other soldiers followed his example, disabling their small arms with the mechanical precision of men who understood that their war had ended not with dramatic battle, but with tactical obsolescence. Klaus took one final look through the observation slit at the burning wrecks that littered the Saar River valley. The Tiger II tanks had represented the pinnacle of German armored technology, crewed by veterans whose tactical skill had been honed through years of combat across multiple theaters. But technological superiority and tactical expertise had proven insufficient against an enemy who possessed perfect intelligence about German intentions, capabilities, and plans. At 1,545 hours, Klaus opened the bunker's main entrance and stepped into the afternoon sunlight with his hands raised above his head. American soldiers immediately surrounded him, their weapons trained but not threatening, their movements suggesting routine rather than tension. The sergeant who had demanded surrender approached with the casual confidence of a man conducting business that had already been concluded. "Sprechen Sie English?" the sergeant asked in accented German. "Yes," Klaus replied in English that he had learned during happier times when such knowledge had seemed merely academic. "I speak English." "Good. My name is Sergeant Morrison, 8th Infantry Division. You and your men will be processed as prisoners of war according to Geneva Convention protocols. Do any of your soldiers require medical attention?" Klaus looked back at the bunker where his men were emerging with their hands raised, their faces showing the resignation of soldiers who understood that their war had ended in tactical defeat rather than heroic sacrifice. "No medical attention required, Sergeant. We are combat effective but without ammunition or hope." Morrison nodded with what might have been sympathy or simply professional acknowledgement. "The trucks will take you to a collection point where you'll be interviewed by intelligence officers. Standard procedure. Nothing more complicated than that." Klaus watched as American soldiers began searching the bunker, removing equipment, documents, and personal possessions with systematic thoroughness. The leather-bound observation log disappeared into a canvas bag along with maps, code books, and radio components. Everything that had seemed important during 6 days of careful observation had become intelligence material for enemy analysts who would use it to plan future operations. "Sergeant Morrison," Klaus said carefully, "may I ask a question?" Morrison studied Klaus with the kind of professional interest that suggested intelligence training rather than simple battlefield curiosity. "You can ask. I can't guarantee I'll answer. How long have you been monitoring our radio transmissions?" Morrison's smile held no malice, only the satisfaction of a professional who had performed his duties competently. "Long enough, Obergefreiter. Long enough to know everything we needed to know." Klaus nodded, understanding that his question had been answered more completely than Morrison probably intended. The American intelligence services hadn't simply intercepted German radio communications. They had penetrated the entire German command structure at multiple levels. The destruction of the SS Panzer Corps had been planned months in advance, using intelligence gathered from dozens of sources across the European theater. As the American trucks loaded Klaus and his men for transport to prisoner of war camps, Klaus took one final look at Strongpoint Siegfried 7 and the battlefield beyond. The concrete bunker that had seemed so formidable 6 days earlier now appeared pathetically inadequate, a relic of tactical thinking that had been rendered obsolete by intelligence capabilities that Klaus was only beginning to comprehend. The smoking wrecks of Tiger II tanks would remain in the Saar River Valley as monuments to tactical revolution that had transformed warfare beyond recognition. Individual courage, tactical skill, and technological superiority had proven insufficient against an enemy who possessed perfect knowledge of German intentions and capabilities. The war had become a chess match where one player knew every move his opponent would make before the pieces were touched. Klaus understood, as the American truck carried him toward captivity and an uncertain future, that he had witnessed more than a tactical defeat. He had observed the end of an era when battles were decided by courage, skill, and superior planning rather than intelligence penetration and technological surveillance. The Strongpoint Siegfried 7 had served its purpose as bait, drawing the 2 SS Panzer Corps into a killing zone that had been prepared with mathematical precision. The 12 men of the 347th Volksgrenadier Regiment had performed their assigned mission perfectly, providing intelligence that had enabled the complete destruction of Germany's most elite armored formations. They had been unwitting participants in a tactical deception that had eliminated 64 irreplaceable Tiger II tanks and their carefully trained crews in less than 1 hour. The bitter irony of their situation would haunt Klaus throughout his years in American prisoner of war camps. They had served their enemy more effectively than they had ever served their own command. Every observation report, every intelligence summary, every tactical assessment had contributed to a trap that had destroyed the very forces they had believed they were supporting. When historians would eventually write about the destruction of the 2 SS Panzer Corps in the Saar River Valley, they would describe it as a tactical masterpiece that demonstrated American superiority in intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and operational execution. They would analyze the battle as an example of how modern warfare had evolved beyond traditional concepts of battlefield heroics and individual tactical skill. But Klaus would remember it differently. He would remember the moment when he saw the SS Panzer Corps advancing toward strongpoint Siegfried 7 and realized with horrible clarity that they were the bait. He would remember watching 64 Tiger II tanks advance confidently toward their destruction, guided by intelligence reports that he had transmitted with the best of intentions. Most of all, he would remember the silence that followed the battle, when the mechanical thunder of armored combat gave way to the gentle crackling of burning tanks and the distant voices of American recovery crews. It was the silence of tactical revolution, marking the end of an era when battles could be won through courage and skill rather than intelligence superiority and technological surveillance. The war would continue for several more months, but Klaus understood that its outcome had been determined not by the destruction of the SS Panzer Corps, but by the intelligence capabilities that had made such tactical precision possible. Germany was fighting an enemy who knew every move before it was made, every plan before it was implemented, every tactical decision before it was announced. In the growing darkness of a March evening in 1945, as American trucks carried Klaus and his men toward prisoner of war camps, the ruins of strongpoint Siegfried 7 stood as a monument to tactical deception and intelligence warfare that had transformed military conflict beyond recognition. The concrete bunker would eventually be demolished by American engineers, but its historical significance would endure as the place where 12 German soldiers had learned that they had been serving as bait in a trap that had destroyed the pride of the German armored forces. The lesson of strongpoint Siegfried 7 would echo through military academies and staff colleges for generations. In modern warfare, the side that possesses superior intelligence capabilities doesn't simply enjoy tactical advantage. It possesses the ability to orchestrate the complete destruction of enemy forces through carefully planned deception operations. The age of battlefield heroics and tactical improvisation had ended in the smoke and flames of burning Tiger II tanks, replaced by an era of systematic intelligence gathering and mathematical precision in military planning. Klaus would spend the remaining years of his life understanding that he had been present at a historical turning point, when warfare evolved from an art practiced by individual heroes to a science conducted by intelligence analysts and strategic planners. The 12 men of strongpoint Siegfried 7 had witnessed the future of military conflict, though they had not recognized it at the time. They had been the bait, and they had performed their mission perfectly.